Right. This is episode 3, right? We've done Alien 3, 7, now the game. David Fincher, our David Fincher deep dive, which has been super fun for me at least so far. I think you guys have been having fun too. So let's talk about the game. Real quick, I'm going to have Justin kind of kick things off, but before he does that, can I just confirm that this is the first time each of us has seen the movie? Is that true?
This was my first time.
Okay, Alan?
Didn't even know this movie existed until we started doing this.
Okay.
Same. Okay, cool. All right, Justin, take it away.
Okay. Well, this is unofficially brought to you by Liquid Death, the drink of champions.
Stop. Oh, you just reminded me. Oh, I can't pause it. Okay, whatever. I'll when there's a lull, I'll go grab my drink. But anyway, yeah, Liquid Death, love it.
So, whenever you're watching a David Fincher and you're feeling the drenchiness, and the drippiness, just pour open or crack open a nice can. Liquid Death. Not your Harry Potter Liquid Death that actually kills you, but Liquid Death as in water that kills millions of people around the world.
Justin, you're reeking of try hard. Stop it. Let's talk about the game. Go.
So, I recognize that David Fincher has no filter, and he will just F-bomb no matter what. I'm like, and again, I'm not too much of a prude because people use it all the time, but it feels like it's so ubiquitous in his movies. I just had to point that out. But I really felt this one was the right way to subvert expectations. This is the cliche of a spy thriller that from one twist to the next, you think it's going to be this kind of movie, then you think it's going to be that kind of movie, then you think it's going to espionage, then money, and then like sex tape and framing him going to prison. Hey, there's Drew. And then I don't think we should talk about the ending just yet, but all of these things, it goes from one twist to the next kind of trope, to the next kind of trope, to the next kind of trope. And then this really reminds me of like a modern day Scrooge, where after this he'll never be the same, and it's actually a positive outcome in the end. Yeah. He gets a second chance at life. So that's my initial thoughts.
Love that. Alan, give us some initial thoughts on the game.
I don't think that this movie is very rewatchable, because once the ending is spoiled, I think it kind of diminishes everything else that kind of happened before it. So it was like I went in like no expectations. Like I literally knew nothing about the movie. Didn't even read like the synopsis or watch a trailer or nothing. It was just like, I'm gonna watch this like fresh off the hook. And it felt very 90s. Man, I'm such a trigger guard snob. And it bothered, like, granted, like pretty much any movie after what was like 2003 or 4 when SWAT came out, Hollywood paid really good attention to trigger discipline, and definitely wasn't there in this one. So I noticed it all the time. So it had, sorry, I say it had 90s vibes, but that was one of the 90s vibes that I got from this movie. But just like Justin was saying, the subverting the expectations was fun. So like I just allowed myself to kind of get immersed in it, and allowed myself to be kind of drug along. Like I allowed I wasn't trying to figure it out. Like I had like based off of the movie poster alone, you're like, all right, there's probably a gimmick. There's something going on that's behind the scenes that that's gonna take you in a different direction. But I was like, I don't care. Just take me along for the ride, and I'm here for it. And And there were like towards the end, I was like, okay, that's it, got it figured out. And then I didn't. And then they pulled the I don't know what's the phrase I'm looking for.
Pulled the wool over your eyes. Was that?
Yeah, wool over your eyes. That's what I was thinking. Pulled the wool over your eyes more than once. So I thought it was fun, but then when it was all done, I was like, don't think you can watch this movie again with the same effect, even a little bit.
Well, let me push back because you're right. I don't think you'd have the same effect. But one thing that when I finished watching the movie, one thing that stuck with me is the whole Sixth Sense phenomenon, where I'm like, oh, I want to go back and rewatch and make sure, like see all the like pieces in place that I was tricked by the first time. That I thought that like the guy that fell in the street was really, dying, and that when they hopped in the ambulance, I thought they were really going to a hospital. Now, I read on IMDb trivia where it said that like you can hear the paramedics snickering for a split second as they're entering the ambulance because they're in on it. And so stuff like that, I think it would be worth a rewatch just to go back and, see all the players and like see the subtle, smirks and snickers. And so I agree. It won't have the same effect of like the shock value, but I think it would be worth a rewatch just to kind of see all those moving pieces and see if it, was a little bit more cohesive and kind of look for Easter eggs along the way.
And now that you say that, there was one in particular that I actually did want to go back and watch, and it was towards the end when the Christine, the chick, starts freaking out that he's got a gun, and she says, "Wait, that's not an automatic." And then she starts to backpedal and starts to try to reveal everything like really fast, trying to convince him not to move forward with anything else. And I remember, like as she said that kind of, I was like, oh wait, we're at a crossroads here, because I'm pretty confident that earlier on in the movie they were using revolvers still. Like there was another character that had a revolver, and I was like, that wasn't an automatic. Like what's the aha gotcha moment with a revolver versus an automatic? And I'm not confident. I thought I remembered it earlier on, like when was it?
It's when the carjacker comes, right? And doesn't he pull it
that's
out?
right.
Or
And
is that right?
I think right. Yes, yeah. I might have to actually watch it again to double check.
But that was the same gun, though.
Yeah, that was his gun, though. And
Yeah.
so that guy might actually not have been an actor. That might actually have been a mugging, and he was so unhinged that he showed it to him. So I'm not sure.
Was it after the break-in at his mansion? Because that's when he actually went up and got the gun. And I thought
remember that was when he borrowed his ex-wife's car. That was where he was in. And so he grabbed his gun and he asked for the car.
Okay. So
and then he got mugged.
It did work.
And he's like, I'm not really stable right now. Not a good time.
See, this is the problem with us only having seen the movie once. None of us know. Like, we can't go back and be like, no, definitively. Drew, give us your experience. I assume this is the first time you've seen the movie as well. If so, first impressions, what'd you think?
Yeah, you guys are doing a bunch of callbacks, and I was watching it for the first time, and so I wasn't looking for anything like that because I was just trying to keep up. And then at the end of the movie, I was like, this might be one of the first, if not the first, Ocean's 13 type movie where it's like, I knew that you knew, but I also knew that you knew that I knew that you knew. And so we tried to do this. And so like the whole time there was kind of like this cloud over me of suspicion where I'm like, I don't know if I can even, I don't know who I can trust, which I think is the point of the movie. But I think that was kind of like my first impression. Is I was like, this might be the first. There were just so many coinkydinks that were like, I gave it a lot of grace. For example, when they jump off what do they jump off of into trash cans? And I'm like, listen, when I was 12 years old, me and my brothers tried that. you don't land where you don't land perfectly center in a trash can in a dumpster. You always hit one of the edges, and both of them landed in their own perfect. And I was like, I mean, like, I know it's a game, but how do you set that up? How
And
do you
not
set
only
up
did they
this
land
victory?
in the trash can, but none of the trash was hurtful.
I was just about to say that. I'm like, how did they know that one of the trash bags wasn't full of glass bottles? You know,
Used heroin needles.
This is a good point. This is a very expensive way to make your own movie. It's like your own personal movie. When all is said and done, that's what he just played out in his millions.
I was gonna wait to do this. Maybe now's a good time. Let's just get it out of the way because maybe it'll spur discussion and we can be apologists for the movie. But if we want to just talk for a moment about some problems we had with the movie, like I said, I was gonna kind of save this for later, but let's just dive in right now. As Drew reminded me, it's almost like, yeah, that Ocean's 13 phenomenon. Like Ocean's 11 was great. It was just enough twists to be believable. But by the time you get to Ocean's 12 and like Matt Damon's mom is the director of the FBI somehow, you know, like, and just like they all went to jail, but then they all got released from jail and they know. And it's just, and then Ocean's 13 gets even wackier. Like Drew was saying, like, I remember watching those movies. I'd be like, Ocean's 11 had like found the sweet spot. When I was watching The Game, it was like, how many things had to go exactly right? Exactly right. Like how many decisions did they have to predict he would make and he actually made them in order for this whole thing to come to fruition? It like you guys know me. I'm number one apologist for movies. Like if there's a way to justify something, I will find it. And that's why I want to open this to the rest of you to see if we can kind of harmonize. If there is a way to be an apologist for this quirk of the movie. But it almost got to the point where I was like, my suspension of disbelief is really being pushed to limits right now. Like the trash can thing, she spills on him and he gets a note that says, don't let her go. Like, how did they know that he would actually not let her go instead of just be like, that's strange, and like toss the paper, and like with the final scene, how did they know that he would pull the trigger on his brother? Or did they know? Was that going to be like plan A was like, happy birthday. Plan B was, oh, what if he shoots me? So they had to plan for plan B by putting blanks into the gun, but she had to pretend like it was a real gun to, like it was just, I almost got to be too much. Like I appreciate the creativity and it was fun. Like it's a fun fantasy, but you really do have to have a healthy suspension of disbelief to just like go along for the ride, like let the movie take you and just believe that it happened. And I'm fine with that. But if we're being realistic and it was a movie based in reality, I have some qualms. What do you guys think?
I think this is where we get into the David Fincher, because we were talking about the last 5 minutes of Seven, how it was contrived. Like they painted themselves in a plot corner where they had to have it exactly that way. And the ending of this one felt that way. Like they had to push him. So they did the psych eval, right? For hours. He was there like the whole day. And I think you're supposed to feel like they had the technology to almost like omniscience to know exactly his trigger points, what he would react in every situation and what he would do and what little things they could put in there that would ratchet him up to the next level.
That's what I was going to say is like the way I kind of reconciled it while watching the movie is I was like, okay, if we made this movie in 2024, the company would be an AI company, and then problem solved. Like because then the suspension of disbelief is just expanded to no end at that point. And so I was like, their psych evaluation for the whole day. Oh man, a whole day of psych eval, and is the equivalent to 2024's AI in their brain. Is they're like, if he's there all day long, then they would know everything about him psychologically, which we all know it's far-fetched. But now it's like if they had AI, if they like if you made the movie today, you prick his finger with blood and put it into this new AI technology, and then they could still have kind of the gimmick at the end where his brother's like, split the bill, and then he goes, whoa, didn't think it was going to be that much. Like, that still holds with that, because obviously they're gazillionaires and that AI technology would cost a lot. And then you'd say they had such a huge budget, so AI could have hired every single possibility.
Um,
Anyways,
I want to hear Alan's opinion on this, but first of all, this needs to be said because I missed this until I did listen to some people's review. Did anybody else? I thought the dad died like early of a heart attack or something. I didn't catch that he committed suicide. And so when I was like, oh, the ending made a lot more sense now. I wish I had caught that detail in the beginning of the movie.
It wasn't in the beginning of the movie. It was about like a third or maybe 2/3 of the way through, where it was a flashback scene that showed his dad walking off the edge of the roof. Yeah, which is, it must have been, I think it was earlier on, because that was the whole point of the clown in the driveway, because it was displayed in the same place, in the same position that his dad was found after he jumped off the roof.
Okay, we'll see. Maybe a rewatch is definitely necessary then.
Yeah, and if it helped me a little bit, because I kind of felt like when the movie ended, I could just kind of felt first time watching, so I just kind of felt wanting more closure. I felt empty almost. But as I was reading up on it, David Fincher in an interview was asked what he thought of the game, and he said that he didn't like the ending either. He was like, "No, that's not what we wanted for the ending," and he said something around the lines of, "If you just have your foot on the pedal the entire time, we thought we would figure it out, but it just didn't turn out to how we wanted it." And so, whether he's saying that to kind of whether he's saying that as the truth, or if he's like covering up for the production company, or the suits in the background telling them, hey, our budget is only this much, you got to wrap this up, so that he was like forced to rush a finish. It helped me reconcile that a little bit. It made me not as bitter at the ending. When I read that, I was like, oh, it's probably the studio. The studio was like, we have a budget, you can't finish it the way you want to, hurry this up, shoot the brother and get on with it, have him high five. And even that though, when he walked into the bar, I was like, the psychological trauma that would have done to a normal human being, like especially someone who like that, who's a suit, works in an office, and then is thrown into like this ridiculous situation. The guy's never been in a fist fight in his life, and you're making him shoot his brother. Like, that would take years of therapy for him to get, not just a few minutes and then they meet in a bar and share a beer and a high five, And so, but like I said, with David Fincher's interview, I was like, all right, probably the studio just doing what studios do and ruining movies for us,
I kind of liked the ending because, no offense, but when you guys said on Marco Polo, Justin and Drew, that you watched the movie, your facial expressions and your tone of saying you finished the movie led me to believe that it was going to be a really crappy ending. And you didn't say anything. You're just like, all right, so I watched the game, and I'll save it for our discussion. And I'm like, so was it bad? And so I was like expecting the ending to be really bad. And so as he hurls himself off the roof, I was like, oh, this is kind of a sad ending. I can see why they thought it was bad. And then he survives. And I was like, oh, he's alive. And I was like stoked as in like an audience member, because I thought it was going to be like a depressing, sad, dumb ending. But it was almost like Justin was saying earlier, it was like an Ebenezer Scrooge situation where like his life has been changed. His eyes have been opened. Like this hard exterior, like his hard like shell of an exterior that nobody could penetrate has now been broken, and now he's a softie, and now he's smiling, and he's got a relationship with his brother, and he chases after the girl at the end, and follows her to the airport to get a coffee, which, by the way, pre 9/11 airports, am I right? You can actually get a coffee before she boards the plane. That was dope. But anyway, I really like the ending because, well, other than my suspension of disbelief, like,
Yeah.
he jumped off that exact spot. They predicted that he would jump off that exact spot, and they tried to like harmonize it and make you feel like it was all planned by the actor at the end saying, "Good thing you jumped because I was supposed to push you if you didn't." And I'm like, it's kind of cheap. I don't quite believe it. You know, I like, this is so much. But I mean, you guys make a good point though. Just to bring it back, you did help my apologist mind with the whole AI thing, because it really is like, we've all experienced where we're talking about something and then an ad shows up on our phone of that thing, and we're just like not just AI, but social media, our phones, they can see where our eyeballs are positioned on our screen. And if our eyeballs are on a certain place on the screen for more than 2 seconds, it like logs that. And it's like, he's interested in that, so let's show him more of that. So like, if the 1990s version of that is a full day psychological eval, and like, we can all agree that Facebook now knows exactly what time we sit on the toilet every day and can predict that with like pretty accurate precision, then if they had, you know, the 1990s version of that would be a full day of psychological evals, and assuming that they could predict with the same amount of precision, that makes it a little bit better. So anyway, so I'm starting to like the movie even more. The more we're discussing this and kind of fleshing it out. But I don't know, did all of you guys not like the ending? Alan, what did you think about the ending?
I had the same impression that you did. And I, like I said in the beginning, I gave it, I guess probably a lot of grace, knowing that it was a 1995 movie, or 96, or like right mid 90s. And so Drew articulated it really well. Like, if it was done today, it would have been done a little bit different. So in that regard, I can say that it probably didn't stand the test of time, and that's okay. So I had to try and just put myself into the mentality of a 90s movie, you know, just like we've talked about it before, I think maybe with like Rocky. You got to put yourselves into the 70s and the world that they're living in then. And as long as you put yourself in that mindset, then it does make sense, and it makes for a good movie. I guess I do have to say that I did have one slight expectation spoiler. When I went to click play, it showed me either the IMDb or the maybe Rotten Tomatoes score that showed both the critics and audiences liked it. And so that was my only expectation spoiler going into the movie. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, really, I just thought it's like, oh, well, it's a David Fincher. It's probably got good reviews, but that's all I knew about it. And so get back to your question, like the ending, my immediate thought was how they know he was going to jump off that exact spot on the roof. Like, it wasn't like it was like funneled in or anything. It was a pretty square roof. Like, he could have gone to any direction from where that happened, and how they know he was going to go there. Yeah. And yeah, who knows? And, but I did, like, again, being the apologist, I started to play it back where I was like, okay, maybe they had multiple contingencies. Maybe it was in multiple different places at multiple different times, or, you know, at different times. And so they planned for multiple different, you know, jump points. Obviously they didn't show this, but this is just me just kind of workshopping it. Maybe they had multiple jump points, because it wasn't like he jumped off, even though the movie kind of showed it this way, but like he jumped off, fell in, and then immediately everybody was down there, even though they were just on the roof. But what it implies is that he jumped off, landed, probably passed out, and like took a minute to recover. And so I gave everybody else enough time to converge on where he was, meaning he could have jumped off the other side, or the, you know, one of the other four sides. So I was trying to like workshop the apologist view. In the end, again, kind of putting myself in the mindset of the 90s instead of just being like, oh, well, that movie doesn't stand the test of time, so it wasn't that good. Because I think it was actually a pretty decent movie.
Can I just bring back what they tried to, like, when he said, good thing you jumped because I was supposed to push you. And that was the actor. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, I feel like there's misalignment, because he was shot earlier in the room. So it wouldn't have even made sense for him to be out on the roof to shove Nicholas off of the roof without spoiling that this was all a charade.
They addressed that.
Oh, go ahead, Al.
They addressed it, right? Because yes, they did the little chase scene in the place where all the actors were, and then everybody dies, and they show that pretty much that the villains ran through and killed everybody. But then when they went back onto the roof, it was the party scene where his brother opened up the door, and all of the actors that were dead were like, some of them were still covered in blood because they just been shot. And it was supposed to be the realization for what's the main character's name?
Nicholas, I think. Was it Nicholas?
Nicholas.
It was supposed to be the realization that it was all just a joke and a gag and part of the game. And that's what makes him killing his brother that much more devastating, because it all comes together, that all of it was planned, all of it was orchestrated. And, oh, look, the guys that I just watched get gunned down are still alive. And then I just killed my brother. Like, she was yelling at me that I had a real gun instead of a fake gun or a planted gun. And so it was supposed to make him push him to the edge, push him to the point where he was going to off himself.
But see, I wish that in true David Fincher fashion, I wish he would have jumped and died. And then you could end the movie. And you're like, was it a game? Like,
Yeah.
Can I mention something that actually crossed my mind when the movie was wrapping up? I honestly thought, I was like, oh, there's probably a fan theory out there somewhere. And if there isn't, I want to propose one, that he actually died. Like, he actually fell to his death, and then he embraces his brother, who still has the gunshot wound. And in like the post-death, he like his spirit, everything works out for the good. He gets the girl, him and his brother have a relationship. The actor that he shot is there as well. So it could just be the afterlife. That's what I was thinking too. I'm like, how weird would it be, like at the very end, like before the credits roll, he gets in the car with the girl, and there's like, I don't know, some indication that it's the afterlife. I was half expecting that to happen, because I'm like, that's the only, because those actors were so good, like, that were initiating the game. Like Christine on the rooftop, she's got tears, and she's like, that's not an automatic. She's like, this whole thing's a joke. She's like revealing it all. She's in a panic mode and desperation. And I'm like, at that point, wouldn't you just be like, I don't know, wouldn't there be like a less intense way to reveal that this was all a joke? And by the way, if it's all a joke, gosh, I'm sorry. Alan, keep apologizing, because I'm going to keep criticizing. They were in his car being chased by gunmen, and bullets broke the windshield and the windows of his car. That couldn't have happened with squibs, right? And then also, when they're in the conference room at the end, hold that thought. When they're in the conference room at the end, they're all running, and the bullets are, how'd they know they'd run this way? How did they not know they'd run that way? And who's controlling the squibs? And how did they time it perfectly when his brother walked through and he shoots? Like, there's no hesitation of him like shaking and trembling. This is my brother. Like, he's never killed a man in his life. You think he's just going to immediately pull the trigger? Go ahead, Al.
I was just going to say, did the windows actually break? Because bullets really should penetrate windows and windshields and car doors, but none of them did. And
well, they were cut by the glass, right? Didn't he have a cut on his nose and a cut on his from that?
I don't remember.
This definitely needs a rewatch.
Sorry, Al. Keep going. Sorry, didn't mean to derail you. Keep going.
But I would say, from the apologist perspective, just leaning into, again, back onto top tier technology of 1995. Put it up to 2024.
97, by the way. It's 97.
Okay. Top tier AI in 2024, where AI knows exactly where you're going to go. It can anticipate your moves. And even if I'm going down one path, like, there are only so many paths that I can take. You're either going to go this way, or this way. And so I have contingencies for all three paths that you're going to go. And so it doesn't matter which path you take, because I'm forcing you down at least one of those options. And you have a guide taking you the entire way. Christine took him to the car. Christine was trying to like at least point him in the direction that he needed to go. So not only do you have the system, the game, the AI leading you, like anticipating your movements, you also have a guide that you think isn't part of the simulation or part of the game that actually is. And then it turns out in the end that not only is it one person, that it's every person that you've interacted with throughout the entire duration of the movie is somebody that was part of the game, stopping you from going this direction, stopping you from going down this alley, forcing you into, into the hallways, forcing you into the elevators, so that the AI, the psychology is leading you down the path, because ultimately, what's the point of the game? The point of the game is apparently to teach you a lesson, to help yourself discover something about yourself. And so all of that leading to at least one of probably multiple climaxes. So in the end, I think it could have actually ended with he not pulling the trigger and they have the happy birthday, and that could have been it. But there was one more step that really pushed him over the edge, and then that was it.
What do you think, Justin? Anything you'd like to add?
The whole point of the game was to how messed up is this? Your brother, and you're like, I need my brother to try to commit suicide like his father, like our father. How am I going to do that? And he's like, I'm going to have him shoot me. And he's going to think he's just lost the rest of his family, the only tie he has left to this world. He's going to have to kill me. And he's going to have to think that. How messed up is that? So, yes, it is contrived. Yes, I mean, this feels like a one-lane movie when you find out the end. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And the more that you played it back in your mind, the more it's a better movie than you think it is. And I was going like, I have cons and I didn't like the ending. And then I put, can we just say right now that, like, who is a better actor than Michael Douglas? I mean, there's probably contemporaries, but who's better than him?
He's great. I love Michael Douglas. As a matter of fact, I was half expecting for there to be like some crazy raunchy sex scenes, because that's what he was known for in the 90s, like with Basic Instinct and I'm drawing a blank, but like that's what he was known for, was for like those like sexy thrillers. And I was like bracing myself. I'm like, I'm glad I'm not watching this with my parents. But it never happened. And we just got to see Michael Douglas cook as an actor. It was awesome. I thought he did, like, yeah, that's a great point, Justin. It's something we haven't talked about yet. It's just the performances. Sean Penn, I'm a huge fan of him. And even though his role was small in the movie, I thought he did a phenomenal job as well. But yeah, great point calling out Michael Douglas. He was really, like, he came to play. I was impressed by his performance.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing, what was it? Just slipped my mind. It was, so Alan was talking about contingencies, like, and that's a good point, Al. Like in the conference room, if they ran this way, the squib guy or the glass breaking guy would press the buttons for this way. If they ran that way, he'd do it this way. So yeah, I could bite on that. But oh, that's what I was gonna say. The zoo. Okay. So workshop this for me, Mr. Apologist, which is so weird. But anybody that doesn't know, I'm usually the apologist. Alan's usually the critic. Here we go. Reverse of roles. So okay. So to find the actor that first did the psych eval on him, he had to backtrack based on the Chinese food the guy was eating. The Chinese restaurant wasn't helping at all. The guy's picture was there with his signature, and I couldn't even read what his name was. He takes it off. He goes to the phone book. He calls an agent. Like, I mean, this is just, I don't even know if AI could do something like that. It could be that precise with its predictions. Do you guys know who Darren Brown is? He's like a magician, psychologist. He, a bunch of YouTube videos. Essentially, he's like, one video I'm thinking of in particular is a random person got taxied to his office, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but essentially, he said, we're an ad agency, and I want you to draw a picture for this particular ad. And Darren Brown in the other room drew a picture, not knowing who this other person was. And they came out and they had very similar pictures. It was like a teddy bear on a rainbow riding a rocket or something weird like that. And how Darren Brown was able to predict that with such precision is psychologically on the way to the advertising studio. he put billboards up that subconsciously implanted these thoughts in the person's mind. And so then the person, when they're thinking about an ad, didn't even realize where these thoughts were coming from, and they drew like a very similar picture to Darren Brown. So like, and he has a bunch of stuff like that. He's a pickpocket. He's, you know, super clever magician. Anyway, but that's like the psychology behind it. And so I'm willing to believe a little bit that that you can orchestrate something like this with such precision. But it's just like I said at the beginning, it's almost like it's too much. It's too precise. It's, I don't know. Drew, how do you reconcile?
I don't. I say that he died early on in the movie, and the game was him just in the afterlife. It's
There you go. That's a fan theory. That's an even more daring fan theory than mine was. What about you, Alan? Any way to justify the finding of the actor at the zoo with his kids?
Yes, because you got to remember the game is specifically tailored to your style of thinking. Just because I wouldn't have made those connections, and I wouldn't have thought to remember what the guy ate for lunch and then track it down to, you know, the very unique and very specific restaurant. This is a guy, like, he was a stockbroker. Like they were playing to his attention to detail as a businessman. And so that could have gone from, you know, like literally lunch orders to business contacts and association with additional individuals. Again, they didn't explain any of this. It's just me being an apologist. But they did establish early on in the movie that the game is very specific and uniquely detailed to each participant. And so you have to allow yourself to believe that I could figure out certain things. Try to think of an example. I noticed what kind of lightsaber the actor had as a prop sitting on his desk mantle, knowing that it belonged to Luke Skywalker from Episode 4, and that very particular one came because of the width and diameter became from Ultra Sabers, and I don't know, like, you know what I mean? Like, there are things that are specific and tailored to my attention to detail that I would pick up that somebody else might not. And that game would be tailored to me, not to anybody else. And so to somebody else, would be like, how could you actually know that that was Luke Skywalker's lightsaber from Episode 4 versus Episode 5 versus Rey Skywalker, Palpatine, from Episode 7, 8, 9, right? Like, I know that there are subtle details, but that's because I'm a stinking Star Wars nerd that I know those things. That's what I like to look at when I was in high school.
Yeah, great point. That's a very good point. We all have our things, right? Like like you guys know, I have like an obsession with checking out other people's books in their libraries, and that's something that's like a quirk that I have that I would probably pick up on. You know, yeah, great point, Al. Excellent point.
So next week I'm gonna, in the backtrack, I'm gonna have a bunch of books. I'm gonna set up right back there.
Don't you dare! I'm not good at tests. What did you think of? I don't even know the actress's name who played. What was her name? Christine. Have you guys seen her in any other movies?
No.
I thought she did great. I really liked that actress. I was like, why haven't I seen her in more stuff? Like the actor, I don't even know the guy's name, but I see him all the time in so many. He's in like 8 Seconds, Armageddon. The actor that initially did the psychological evaluation on Michael Douglas. I don't know his name, but he's in so many movies and he's so good. I looked him up today. Turns out he died in 2014, unfortunately. But he's a great actor, but nobody knows who he is. You know, he's like not like a movie star. But I thought his performance was good. Like I don't know. There wasn't really a bad performance, was there, in this movie? What do you think, Justin?
I don't recall any like well acted, well paced. The other thing was the sense of they did really good job of the sense of despair and increasing despair. You know, and from, I mean, I guess you have to be a good actor to play an actor acting in 2-3 different ways. Like, especially the main chick, she she had to play like at least 3 different parts, but maybe 4 different parts of being a waitress. Okay, she's not actually a waitress. She's the love interest in all those pictures, you know. So she had to be that person. And then when he confronts her, now she's the person that's part of the game. And then you know, she's whispering to him, and then she drugs him, and then you're like, well, who is this person really? And then when he meets her again, and then she's like, I'll tell you how to get out of this game, right? Or is it the cafeteria? I can't remember. But then she plays that role. So, I mean, he played like, I don't know, 5 different characters throughout the movie.
That was another thing that a critique I had of the movie is I'm like, I don't like how they started the game before he even started the game. And
Yeah.
Chris, the example, she's like, you never saw me there at the golf club before, had you? And it's like, well, like now you're just, when you're inside the game, Alan, I liked your what you said about like it's toned very specific, but they hadn't done any psych eval on him yet. So she's just supposed to be everywhere. They're paying this actress to be everywhere all the time until he starts the game.
Not quite. The game actually started when his brother signed him up for it. That's when the game began. But they still had to do like the psych evaluation. So they start, the company is hired by the brother, and then the brother, and so they're like, he's going to be like, okay, I'm going to go meet my brother. I'm going to give him the card, and he's going to do this. And they're like, okay, we're going to put things into place even as early as then. You just need to tell us where to be. And then that way it's going to lead into how blending the game versus game and reality, because once he knows the game has begun, which because he's already a skeptic. That's why they lied to him in the beginning. He's like, you didn't qualify. And he's like, whatever, this is stupid anyway. And then it starts to begin, and he's like, oh, okay, right. He was already a skeptic. So they already know that they have to blend. And that's easy information. Like that's just basic character profiling. Like you don't have to do a psych eval to know that somebody's a skeptic, right? So they have to weave in the reality into the game before it actually begins in his mind. Otherwise, he's going to suspect everything once the game's begun. That's what I would say to that.
That's a good point. I never even thought about that. Like, because of his psychosis, they had to say, you don't qualify for this game, even though he was already started the game. That makes more sense now, because that was actually one of my felt like contrived and didn't make any sense to me, but you put it that way, it does.
And it also gives credence to your idea that there's contingencies. Like if he never went to the 14th floor and did the psychological evaluation, I bet there was like a refund policy for his brother. You know, if he doesn't take the bait, then this whole thing just, you know. So yeah, I like that, Al. One thing I wanted to mention too is I'm glad. Another reason I like the ending was because when she's as you know, Christine has tears in her eyes and she's pleading with them and she's like, this gun is real, and she's talking to the people behind the door. She's like, he's got a real gun, you know, and she's like, this is all just a game, it's for your birthday. Like she's trying to convince him and all this stuff. It gave me like the Recruit and Training Day vibes in both those movies. Remember how in The Recruit, Al Pacino's character, when Colin Farrell finally realizes that like the jig is up and he's been used, and he's got Al Pacino at gunpoint, and Pacino, he's like, you spilled my coffee. He's like, you passed your final test, like congratulations, you know, like that whole thing. And then he pulls the trigger, and like, if I remember right, and you know, obviously it turns out that Al Pacino was just lying to him at that final scene. It wasn't a game. He didn't pass any test. It was real, actually. Same thing with Training Day. Remember when what's up, Callum? Good to see you. Remember in Training Day when Denzel Washington, the protagonist finally, like, he survives the gang members that wanted to shoot his head in the bathtub, and he goes and finds Denzel, and Denzel is like my man or whatever, you know, my N word. He's like, yeah, He's like, listen, he's like, calm down, Jake. I think the guy's name was Jake, the protagonist, right? It's like, calm down, Jake. Like, you passed your final test. You made detective. Congratulations. You know, like he tried to backpedal on the twist. And then it ended up, you know, obviously it wasn't a twist and he was really a bad guy and he really did want Jake to die. Anyway, I like that this movie didn't do that. That it wasn't like her backpedaling, being like, it's just a game, it's for your birthday. And then something comes through the door and it turns out they were serious and they were trying to kill him. They did take his money. I like, you know, even noting that this movie came out before those other two movies. Yeah, both those other two movies did. I like the fact that he stuck with the game. He stuck with the plot and he didn't bail on it like those other two movies did at the end to give you a twist on a twist. He just kept twisting the same twist, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Callum, was this your first time watching the game, and if so, what was your first impression?
Yeah, this was my first time watching the game. Sorry, I don't if I'm repeating what other people have said. Kids were a nightmare. Finally got them to sleep though, but man, I thought it was a great ride. It's one of those movies that straight away a great way to capture you, so that in every single part of the movie you're looking for something, so it stops you from being bored in the quieter parts of the movies. You know what I mean? So yeah, I loved it. Well, I would give it out of 10. I would give it a 7.8. 7.8 out of 10.
Well, not even a 7.9?
No, not a
You,
7.9.
how dare you? Must be a Scottish thing. Can't do it.
But yeah, I thought the acting was great, the cast was great, the plot was great, the idea was great, the twists and turns, and I had you guessing and doubting and whatnot. Yeah. I've got my cons to it, but that's my sorry, can you hear that? Oh, okay. My washing machine's violent. But yeah, that's my initial thoughts, and yeah.
So we were debating back and forth just a little bit, just workshopping a little bit. The biggest contention I think that we have is that it's a little dated. And so Drew proposed, he's like, if this movie was done in like 2024, it would have been like AI that was like manufacturing the game and moving it forward. And so just putting yourself, the suspension of disbelief, putting yourself back in the 90s, 97, helps keep it real. But I wanted to ask you to settle a debate that none of us could remember. My biggest problem with the movie was at the end when she says, he's got his gun and she's like, wait, that's not an automatic. It's a real gun. It's for real. And I thought that they had used revolvers earlier in the movie, and that kind of pulled me out of the realism of the moment. But I might be remembering the same gun from earlier in the movie. Do you remember seeing any revolvers earlier in the movie?
So I remember, well, that gun was introduced when he was searching his own house.
Yes.
Yeah, that's as far as I remember. I can't remember any of the bad guys using a revolver. So yeah.
And one thing we were saying too, Callum, is the problem with this being all of our first time watching the movie is none of us can recall. We need to go back and rewatch because yeah. I mean, if you guys were like me, and I think you were, and some of you have already mentioned it, but I just sat back on the couch and was along for the ride. I ate a snack and I was just like, take me on a journey. Like I wasn't sitting on the edge of my seat with like a notepad. Like I wasn't like paying super close attention. I was just trying to enjoy the movie. And so as a result of that, there's a bunch of unanswered questions that we keep running into.
Which is a sign of I think it's a sign of a good movie that makes you want to dissect it more. It makes you want to dig in and rewatch it. You know, I don't know if any of you guys have seen this, but I think that point about AI is good, and you're having to put yourself back into the what year did you say it was, Alan? 97.
Yeah.
So
when were you born, Callum?
I was 95, so I was a seasoned 2-year-old at that point, you know, so understanding the characters and all that. But there's a British, you guys might not know about this, but on Netflix, there's one of these guys he's kind of like a magician, kind of like did someone already mention this?
Is it Darren Brown?
Yeah.
Yeah, I already mentioned it. That's funny. That's funny that you
That's
picked up
a
on
good.
too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So have you seen the one where he was trying to set up to see if someone would kill somebody?
Not if they would kill someone. I saw the one with the advertisement where he put billboards up on the road on the way to the ad agency, and then he was able to predict with really close precision what the person would draw as an ad for this ad agency because he subconsciously planted those ideas in their mind. What's the one you're referring to?
Well, I think the one I'm referring to is maybe a little bit closer to the movie. So he sets up this event, and someone's coming as his first time working for this like big fancy event establishment type thing, and he wants to try and have the goal of, can I make this random person, kill somebody tonight? Which is a pretty big decision. Like if you take a random stranger off the street and say, do you think you could kill a person? They'd be like, oh, are they trying to kill me? No. Are they trying to do this? No. Like, do you think you could just kill somebody? Then the answer would be no. But it starts off the event by they're getting all the food together, and in the UK we have something called sausage rolls, which is a piece of sausage wrapped in like a puff pastry, you know, very popular back home. And so he's got the normal sausage rolls, and then he's got the vegetarian option, and he spills the sausage rolls, both sausage rolls. And then he starts just putting them, obviously he doesn't know which one's vegetarian, which one's normal, but he just starts putting them and he says, hey, come on, help me. And then the guy's like, well, which one is, it doesn't really matter. Who cares? And he says that that's the one thing that he does at the beginning. And if they go along with it, then the chances are that they'll end up killing, he can make them kill someone at the end of it.
Oh.
So he starts bringing up these scenarios where it increases the moral dilemma for the person, and then towards the end of it, he sets it up so that this individual pushes someone off of the top of the building. So that's why it was kind of like similar to the game. I was kind of thinking of the whole everything set. Darren Brown makes it clear this is all set up. Everybody here's an actor, you know. So similar to the game where everybody's an actor, everything's set up, and then he kills someone. Obviously, he doesn't know who he's killing, but he kills somebody at the end of the game. So this is my only thing where I was kind of a little bit I thought the ending was great, but I thought what could have made it, like everyone was cheering for him and celebrating and things like that. But I was a little bit like, well, what are we cheering for? The guy didn't really do anything great, you know. He was just punked, to use that. Like it's not as if he done some moral heroic thing towards the end of the game, and all the characters within the game are looking at him thinking, hey, this is a good guy here, you know. So I didn't really, at the end of it, I didn't think he was a hero.
Yeah.
But it was kind of treated as like, you are, you know, fantastic. And I can understand why they would feel that, because they're like, we've pulled off this elaborate game. But yeah, I thought the ending was great. That was just my only little drawback.
At the same time, though, I mean, he survived the taxi.
Yep.
And he had to use his intuition. And I've heard that they had a contingency, like there was like scuba divers in the water to rescue him if he was going to die. But he also survived Mexico, waking up in Mexico and getting back. And he really did figure out the clues to get him to the next building, get him to we talked about the guy that set up the game, and he's at the zoo with his kids. He figured that out. He figured out all the clues to lead him to the end. And I mean, he played his part well throughout the game to get him to commit suicide.
To the end point. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
which is a sad ending, isn't it? Because it's like, oh, so you just went out the same way that your dad did, that depressed you your whole life. Or
you missed this part, but how messed up is Callum? If Jared conspired to, like, how can I get Callum to kill me? That's gonna be the game.
Jared wouldn't have to do such an elaborate thing.
Nice. But then also, like, would you feel so bad you'd throw yourself off the building? Which, if you didn't, then shame on you, and they have an actor to push you off, apparently. But,
Yeah.
But then I would have thought that because that actor, he was like, "Yeah, I'm glad you jumped," because I would have remember him saying that line. But then I would have thought that, I don't know, like, and this is credit to David Fincher and the whole, like, plot of the movie, because you're still sort of like battling it in your mind, because he's thinking that these guys are coming in to, he doesn't know who to trust, you know. So are they coming through to hurt me? Are they coming through to prank me or whatever, you know? So you can understand why he was like, "Nah, I've got my gun. I've had enough. I'm done with all of you. So I'm just going to end myself." I don't know.
Yeah, one thing I'll add too, just in terms of why they were applauding, not only, like, Justin made some good points about, like, it was a really difficult task, and he found the clues and he, you know, worked his way through it. But to Callum's point, he had a pretty piss poor attitude the entire time. He was still bitter and mean and angry, and it's almost like, you know, in retrospect, when they were at his cabin, you know, drinking coffee and he gets drugged, Christine throws out that line. She's like, at the end of the day, it's just money. At least, like, you could be dead. At least you're still alive. It's almost like she was kind of coaching him to have a better attitude, of, like, trying to get perspective. It was kind of like the ghost of Christmas present, you know, talking to Ebenezer Scrooge, trying to, you know, relate to him how good life actually is, and why are you such a sourpuss all the time when, like, life is actually, like, being alive is good. But then it culminates in the expectation that he'll throw himself off the building. And so it's like, even with those encouraging words from Christine, they were still expecting him to be apparently suicidal. And they didn't say this in the movie, but we've all heard people that jump off the Golden State Bridge, that was called, in San Francisco, and like, to kill themselves. And the survivors always say they're so, like, when they popped out of the water with all their broken bones and stuff, they're so glad to be alive.
Yeah.
So, you know, that wasn't mentioned in the movie, but just if we really wanted to do an evaluation on his psychology and how happy he must have felt once he realized he's not dead, his brother isn't dead, and he completed the game, I don't know. I think it warrants some applause.
Well, you also have 100 people or more trying to get you to commit suicide, and that's their whole thing. Like, you deserve something to get punked that hard.
Yeah. Alan, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I really like the comparison to Ebenezer Scrooge. Like, the Dickinson model here, I think, is the reason why you applaud him at the end of the movie. Ebenezer Scrooge was a terrible person. He had a piss poor attitude when between all of the ghosts that were visiting him, and then even in the ghost, like Bo was just saying, the ghost of Christmas Present, he was feeling sorry for himself. Just like Christine was trying to point out the silver lining when they're in the cabin, and he's like, "Oh, you don't even understand. It's not just about my money. It's about pensions, yada yada yada." Like, he's still feeling sorry for himself, and so it's the self-realization and the self-actualization, and him developing as a person, waking up Christmas morning, "Merry Christmas, God bless us, everyone." That's the victory for the story. Is that it's a huge character development and a shift in perspective, appreciating, you know, his life and his brother's life and all that kind of stuff. I thought it was, I agreed that it was a little bit rushed at the end. It definitely felt rushed, as they were just like, was it Drew that said it, where, you know, they just, you know, high five and split the bill or whatever. There's probably some pretty significant psychological reckoning that needed to happen after that, that they just either didn't have time for, the production studio was like rushing the end or whatever. but the realization of his character growth is the applaudable win of the movie.
Yeah, and like on that topic, the amount of so when I first started watching, I did sit down like with my notes open in my phone, and it took me maybe like 10 minutes before I was like, this is no way to watch a movie. Like this, and I put it down and just enjoyed the experience. But something I did write down very early on is I was like, the amount of foreshadowing that they put in there. Like the first instance of it was, and I can't remember the specifics, I'm sorry, but was with his brother. He said, butt kiss. No, his name.
Oh yeah,
Seymour Butts.
Seymour Butts.
And he was like, Seymour Butts. And so he was like, it was very, very small, very subtle, but a riddle. And so it kind of acclimated us in the universe that it's like, oh, well, he's grown up with his brother. And so he understands clues and like just something that small, because all of us are like Seymour Butts. And it's like, oh, he was called by a fake client. That's what we all thought. And like, oh, he's getting punked. And he's like, tell Seymour Butts I'll see him there. I'll see him there. And then you're like, oh, well, he's playing along. And then you find out that it's his brother. And you're like, they have that connection of teasing each other. And anyway, so like the foreshadowing bit of it. And then I recognized it a lot more often throughout the movie. I just didn't write any of them down, which I probably should have now that we're talking. But that was just something else that I saw that I was like, oh, that was like, again, David Fincher. I think David Fincher likes those foreshadowing moments. And so a little bit of his style.
Yeah, a little bit of his signature there. And we'll talk, I want to kind of wrap this up on, since this is a David Fincher deep dive, we've been analyzing the movie, I feel like really, really fairly. But I do want to, wrap this up by bringing it back to David Fincher style. But before we do that, I just want to mention one thing Drew just reminded me of in terms of foreshadowing. I remember for the first 1/3 of the movie, the whole first act, I was like, this movie so far could be like a rom-com or just a straight up comedy or a very lighthearted movie. It's like an elaborate game and pranks and all this stuff. It was the music. The music was so eerie throughout the whole, and I'm just like, this feels like it could be a fun comedy or like adventure movie, but the music keeps bringing me back to this sullen, like thriller feeling in my soul. And it just reminded me of the power that music has in movies. It was like this slow piano, as he's like going to the restaurant, meeting with his brother, and he takes out the card and he looks at it. And it's just like, and with music that was in like a major chord instead of a minor chord, this would have a completely different feel to it. And it's just the fact that it's in this slow minor chord with a piano playing slowly. And it's like a dreary feeling, like monotonous, that it made you feel like this is a darker movie than it actually could have been. And again, to kind of bring this back to David Fincher, I think that that's obviously his style. And if I didn't know if I didn't know who David Fincher was, I would probably give more thought to that idea. But I'm like, no, this is David Fincher. And at least in this stage of his career, I feel like he was very focused on twisted thrillers. Drew, you're about to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say the kind of like another little signature thing that I think David Fincher did as a director of this movie was making you feel like Michael Douglas's character is really useless. Like he's just not that interesting. He cares about money. And the scene in the first few scenes in particular was like what he does after work. He's like this hot shot at work. And then as soon as he goes home, he's nothing to nobody. He's like sitting, drinking, watching boring news. And like, he's bothered when somebody calls him and it's late, So like you kind of get the same feeling as that character through the direction of those scenes. And then I wanted to just point out another David Fincher moment that I felt was when the news anchor started shifting, and like it was just so unsettling. That entire scene felt like a fever nightmare, where you're kind of like, I feel like I just want to get out of this library. Like I just want to. None of those books are real, and they're not readable. And even if they are, they're like encyclopedias. You know, like I'm just so uncomfortable in that room. I want to get out. And then with like the eeriness of the news anchor talking directly to him, like again, it's just nightmare-esque, where it just makes you uncomfortable because you're like, it's just not normal, especially if you're putting yourself in 1997 Brit mindset. Like if your box TV was talking to you nowadays, we'd be like, oh, there's a camera in the TV for sure. But back then you're like, how are they doing that? I'm just so uncomfortable that he's being watched. I feel like I'm being watched. And I think that's something that David Fincher's really good at, that we've seen in all three movies so far, is inserting scenes that make you feel physically uncomfortable as the audience member. And I think that's intentional.
Yeah, I agree. But also credit where credit's due. To your point about Nicholas being a very humdrum character, Michael Douglas like took that character and captured your attention with it. Something like with pure acting skill. I feel like he did so good. And there are certain actors that have that quality that they're just a pleasure to watch on screen, no matter what role they're playing. Denzel Washington obviously has that. Like I could watch Denzel Washington, look in the mirror and wash his face for 2 hours and I'd be happy with the movie. Like he's so charismatic and he just embodies whatever character he's in. He's got that same thing with Brad Pitt. He's always like picking his teeth or he's like wincing one eye. Like there's all like these subtle like things that some actors know how to do really well. Michael Douglas, he like in The Game, he did like this puckering of his lips and the squinting of his eyes. And he'd take his time when he walks somewhere, like just like these subtle little idiosyncrasies that make the character compelling to watch, that I feel like really good actors know how to leverage without being over the top. Like Jim Carrey's famously known as like an over actor. Like he does too much of that it's distracting and it's hilarious, but like that's his shtick. But I feel like really good actors know how to like really leverage those subtle little variables to make them like to capture audiences. And I feel like Michael Douglas did that with a very, otherwise ordinary character.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of adding in natural human tendencies, because something like he exhales like he's frustrated.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, like normal actors, when they say action, they're not really frustrated. Now they have to pretend. And so they don't, like, their body doesn't just react that way. And then same with Brad Pitt in All of the Oceans. He's eating stuff, which forces him to be natural, like a natural human, with slurping noises and like you can hear it through his cheek. And like it bothers us as an audience, but it also humanizes Hollywood as an audience member. And I think, I want to give Michael Douglas props, but I also think the direction to be able to direct a scene in a giant room with a single person and make it captivating it goes both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And in those scenes particular, I think the direction with Michael Douglas really brought out the best, maybe not the best, but it really brought out, I think, what they were trying to achieve with what they wanted us to feel in those moments. And so Michael Douglas obviously executed it amazingly. And then just to your point, I think it's natural human noises that really, at least for me, draw me in and make me feel like make me feel like that character is now personalized as a human being that makes mistakes,
Just real quick, I want to get everybody's take on David Fincher's role in this, but just on that same note, also not just human tendencies and little idiosyncrasies and, Brad Pitt eating in every scene and like picking his teeth and raising his eyebrow, like all of that, I agree 100%. But also just a shout out to Brad Pitt, man, in Ocean's 11 when they're in the bar scene and he's like, he's got his face down in his arms and he's just staring blankly into space. And Danny Ocean is like, think we need one more? We need one more. And Brad
Okay.
Pitt doesn't do a thing, and he's just like staring off into space like he's so exhausted. Even Brad Pitt doing nothing captivates me. Like him being like in like a sullen, drunken, exhausted state, staring off into space as, you know, Danny Ocean's like talking to himself essentially with Rusty right next to it. Like that was such a cool scene. I freaking love those movies. I love Brad Pitt. All right, let's all go around real quick and just. Oh, sorry, Justin. Were you about to say something?
I'm kind of sad that we're never going to talk about Brad Pitt again. Or next week.
Next time. It's one of my favorite movies ever. Probably top 10. Fight Club is. I think it might be top 10. We'll save that discussion for 2 Tuesdays from now.
Okay, so I wanted to make these 2 points, especially with David Fincher. In Seven. Last week, we talked about how the end scene is so crucial because you care about the characters. In this one, you don't care about Nicholas the entire movie, but you can kind of understand his plight. And like, the more you go down, the more you, I guess, start to care. But I mean, he gets that ovation that you, Callum, that you're like, you weren't sure about, and that's understandable, but it's like, that's not the point of this movie. Is nobody is really likable, and you're following this character that you can't really relate to, and maybe some aspects of it you can relate to, but we're not rich, we're not lonely, we're not, I don't know, depressed and thinking about suicide. So in this one, it's almost like you're already uncomfortable and not caring, and you're forced to care more and more. But it's contrived, but it's on purpose. And to the point of the video in the beginning with a clown, or it starts with a clown, and then it goes into psychosis, and like, is he drugged? Is he talking to a figment of his imagination? Psychological thriller. No, and then it goes to spy thriller, then it goes to espionage, then it goes to money laundering and losing your identity, and then it goes through all of these different tropes and stages. And that's why Michael Douglas, he was the 90s star of all these trope movies, and he's going through all of these different, I don't know, rooms, and he's turning all of those tropes. David Fincher is turning all those tropes on their head and ratcheting it up and forcing you to care more and more till the end.
Love that, man. Yeah, I 100% agree. And again, tying it into David Fincher, it shows his, again, early on, this third movie, really only second because he didn't have very much creative control over Alien 3. But it just shows how like versatile he is. I love that you pointed that out, Justin. I actually didn't think about it until you pointed that out. But that movie, like this movie, really does cover all of those genres in David Fincher's style with his feel. And I don't know, I thought he stuck the landing. Callum, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm trying to put myself, like, as you just highlighted, this is his third movie. Man, he's building himself some steam, isn't he? He's building himself quite the reputation. He's letting these actors act. He's letting them shine. He's putting in his artistic liberties and expertise in there as well, and it's just bringing out the best of everybody. So it seems as though that if I'm putting myself in that time frame, if I was an actor, if I was a big wig actor, I'd be like, get me on a David Fincher movie. I want to be part of this. And it just seems as though like there's a lot of movies where you'll watch it for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, maybe even 3 hours. In fact, there was did you ever see the movie The Irishman? It's 4 hours. It was on Netflix. So it's a 4-hour movie. Didn't have to be.
You watched The Irishman? Isn't that illegal?
Yeah, they all died, thankfully. No, I'm kidding. No, I like so there's so many movies these days where there's so much fluff in it that's not necessary, you know. Whereas with David Fincher, it just seems as though he's like, I have got so much, and every single thing that I'm putting in here is deliberate and intentional, you know. So yeah, I'm enjoying the ride. Looking forward to it continuing.
Dude, that's such a good point, dude, about the intentionality of everything that he puts in there. Like it's a really, like, his movies are buttoned up.
Mm-hmm.
He's, yeah, great point, Callum. I couldn't agree more. Alan, David Fincher in The Game. What do you think?
Don't know that I can add much more. I think I appreciate you making me take the apologist approach, because I might have said earlier on, if this were a Batman movie, it would have been there was the bomb in the ocean. In the ocean, there are catfish. The Catwoman and the Penguin, they're the ones behind this. That, like, right, like taking kind of liberty in some of the leaps in the logic train. But
Hey, Al, you know they've come out with more Batman movies since 1960. You know that, right?
1997 we had.
That's true. That's a good point. Good point. Okay, point taken. Keep going.
Stay in your lane, Bo.
What's that?
I said, stay in your lane, Bo.
Good point. Good point. All right, stepping down.
Yeah. Besides that, yeah, I really don't have much more to say. Like, I think all the David Fincher pieces are really good. The one thing that I was expecting was just probably a little bit more grime, a little bit more dirty, a little bit more Seven. And sorry, I guess I'm getting late. But I was expecting a little bit more of that. Also because I've also seen some of the movies that we're going to watch and review again later, and they are really grinding. This one was a little bit different because it was a little bit more clean. Like, it's top tier society, and so it didn't feel quite as grimy at first. And then it kind of, it kind of gets that way. And then he does. He's really particular with. I've noticed with the way that he does some of his shots, where he kind of starts with an extreme close up of something. Something to really just capture how kind of gross this particular scene is, or the scenery. And so I noticed that he did that when they were running like through the alley. And so he would do this kind of a zoomed in shot, and then he would follow, like, go through like the busted up milk crate or whatever, and then follow them running or something like that. And so that's something that I've come to expect from a David Fincher film, that is kind of just his stylistic cinematography. So there, I said I didn't have anything to say, but there was something to add.
There you go. Drew, you get the final word. What do you think about The Game and David Fincher?
Yeah, Alan, that's an interesting point. I wonder if David Fincher, I'd love to ask him if he was trying to step almost away from like the dark griminess, and then it just didn't do as good as Seven. It did good in the box office. It just did, because of his success with Seven, but I don't think it did not do as good as Seven. And so I wonder if he was like, I did Seven, I did the dirty, I did the gross stuff. Let me see if I can kind of start walking in a different direction. He did this, still a great movie. And then he's like, didn't do as good as Seven. This is what the people want. And then as we will see in Fight Club, it goes back to very poster child of David Fincher movies. But something I wanted to add that I read is that Jodie Foster was cast as David Fincher, as Michael Douglas's daughter, and was going to co-star with him. And then because of scheduling conflicts, she had to. They picked her, and she sued the studio for over $14 million because she missed other opportunities. And then, as we'll find out in a couple movies, David Fincher and Jodie Foster made a reunion back with Panic Room. And so something just kind of interesting to go off there, that the studio did have their hand in David Fincher's pockets, that during the process of this. So that might also attribute to kind of why it wasn't so grimy. And then kind of like what we talked about with Count You Weren't Here is that's why the ending was David Fincher in an interview said he didn't like the ending either. He felt it was rushed. And so I think it's the studio. And anyways, that was just kind of a fun little tidbit that Jodie Foster was supposed to be in this, guiding and co-starring with Michael Douglas, and then the fallout. But apparently David Fincher and Jodie Foster have a good relationship because he cast her in Panic Room. And so, but just to round out my opinion on what was the question? Just on this as a David Fincher movie? Yeah, I think it's exactly that. I think it has a lot of his elements in it, and we could see that. But I also feel like maybe he was trying to take a couple steps away from the grime to kind of dip his toe into something else, and then was just ricocheted back into it. And they're like, you know what? Don't fix what ain't broke. I like this. I'm good at this. Let me just do this. And another thing to note is I can't remember which city it was, but they mentioned the city in this one. So this is the first San Francisco. Yeah. So this was the first 1 out of 3, but this is the first Fincher movie where they mentioned the city, and they don't mention it in Fight Club. I don't believe. We'll find out. And then I'm going to start listening to the rest of the movies because I want to see. That's just something interesting that maybe David Fincher wants to kind of hold on to. Is he's like, I don't want to give any names of cities, and it'll be interesting to see if he names any more down the road because I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I think he did name the planet in Alien 3, but if you want to be technical, it's not a city. So
I want zip codes. Okay.
And I'll just say, just to comment on what you just said, Drew, I'm actually glad the Jodie Foster thing didn't work out. I thought Sean Penn was great in this movie. He's in 3 scenes, but I thought he killed it. I'm a big Sean Penn fan, despite the controversy of his personal life or whatever, but I think he's a great actor. You know, shout out to Secret Life of Walter Mitty. It's best role ever. And he was so good in that. But anyway, I thought it was fun to see Sean Penn in this one. And I read that same thing on IMDb trivia. And I remember thinking, I was like, kind of glad Jodie Foster, I thought Sean Penn did a good job in that role.
Well, Sean Penn was his brother. I think Jodie Foster was going to be his daughter. I don't know.
What IMDb trivia said was once she was out, they cast Sean Penn as his brother instead.
Gotcha.
Like she was supposed to be the one that started the game, and because she wasn't in it, they pulled in Sean Penn. So
okay.
Anyway, cool. Well, if you guys don't have anything else to add, I know it's super late for Al, so we'll wrap this up, and we'll.
Yeah, he's a stone right now.
Yeah,
he's asleep standing up.
He is. I thought I saw him nodding off a couple times. So we'll wrap this up, but 2 Tuesdays from now, we'll hit Fight Club, and might I recommend we watch it? Justin, if you haven't seen it before, maybe watch it twice before our meeting next. But don't tell anybody about it. First rule. So
tell anybody about what?
Exactly. Perfect. All right, gents. You have a good night. David Fincher for life. Let's go.
Later, boys.
Good night, lads.